Hi, I'm Jeff Bermudez.
And I'm Omar Kadri.
Welcome to The Collective Journey.
Join us as we explore some of the most promising talents, thought leaders, and change influencers in our city and beyond.
As we uncover these hidden gems, I hope you'll find that they're people just like you and I, with hopes and dreams and gifts that they would like to show to the world.
It is our mission to share their work, to share their story, and to appreciate what our community is capable of producing.
This is my adventure.
This is your adventure.
This is our collective journey.
Hi, I'm Omar Kadri, and welcome to another episode of The Collective Journey. A fundamental aspect of the human experience is our ability to share and tell stories. Since the beginning of history, the art of storytelling has been used to express various ideas and themes. But sometimes history only highlights certain stories. There are many other stories that do not see the light of day. This fact is not lost with our next guest. Leila Almawy is a filmmaker whose mission is to bring light to these untold stories. Today she tells us about her personal journey and life experience. Let's have a listen.
So you were born in London?
No, I was born in Mississauga, Credit Valley Hospital.
Awesome.
And we didn't even live there for very long, and lived in London till I was 4, London, Ontario, our fake London. And then we moved to Saudi Arabia, lived there for 4 years. I went to like a British private school, and then moved to Lebanon for 2 years, American school. Moved to Montreal for 3 years, DDO, and then we moved back to Lebanon. I spent the next 7 years there of my adolescence. I started my first year of university there, and then I transferred to Western, and I came back in 2009, and I've been here ever since. Well, I mean, I did move to Dubai at some point for like 8 months in 2013. Didn't like it, and I decided to come back.
Okay.
That's pretty much, yeah, lots of moving.
So I was trying to do the math while you were doing that. Were you 21 when you came here for university?
I was 20 when I came here in
Close
2009.
enough.
Yeah.
Nice,
I was
okay.
20, yeah.
Okay, and what did you take at Western?
I studied film studies, which is no longer existent at Western. They closed down the department. It's very sad. It was in the UC building. So I spent a lot of my time in the UC basement, as we'd call it. It was a pretty small department. But it was a nice program. It was a really great program. I had some pretty awesome professors as well that I learned a lot from. Great mentors. And then we graduated, and that's pretty much it.
Okay, what was it, under the arts at the time?
It was arts and humanities, right? So, but the program was called film studies. It was a 4-year program. And it was, a lot of folks assume that, you get to watch films and you get to discuss them, and I wish it was that easy, but it's, way deeper than that. It's, you learn about the socio-political aspects of the world that we live in. You have to be an analytical and a critical thinker and writer and do a lot of research. Lots of work went into it. And we got to make a really cool documentary called Londombia under the guidance of a very renowned Colombian filmmaker, or Argentinian filmmaker, I'm sorry. His name was Fernando Solanas.
Okay.
So he came to Western for 3 days, which was totally rad. Totally fangirling over this guy. And then, and so we did this really quick 1 week long documentary about Colombian immigrants in London, Ontario. And it was pretty awesome. It's pretty cool. My first big documentary experience.
Okay. Shot all throughout the course of 1 week.
A couple days even, yeah. And we started shooting it before he came, because he was only here for 3 days. And he would come and see our process. And the thing is, he doesn't speak English, so it's only Spanish or French. So I was the translator, because I speak French as well. So it was a very interesting dynamic for sure.
Now, if I heard you correctly, you said that you took your first year in Montreal?
My first year was in Lebanon.
Was in Lebanon?
Of university, yeah.
And that was film?
So actually what happened was I did my freshman year, because it's an American system, at AUB, which is American University of Beirut. And it was a very general type of 1-year program. It's where you take a bunch of different courses to figure out, what exactly it is you want to do. And then I decided, they don't really have anything I want there. So I ended up transferring to LAU, which is the Lebanese American University. And I did radio, TV, film, or communication arts was the bigger sort of umbrella term. And I did that for like a semester and a half, I guess, because I was working full-time the second semester. And then I transferred to Western, yeah.
How did you find the transition from a Lebanese university into a Canadian university?
Honestly, the transition from Lebanon to Canada in general was a huge culture shock for me. Like, even though, I'm Canadian and all of that, and I understand the culture here and everything, I was extremely homesick. I missed the language, I missed the food, I missed the people, how lively Beirut city is. And, you go from a hustling, bustling city like Beirut to, a much calmer city like London, and it's a shock for sure. Not a lot of friends that I made at Western, but I did meet some interesting people. I stayed friends with my professor, so took her on as my mentor and everything. Learned so much from her, and we're still friends till this day. We meet up for dinner, coffee sometimes. We exchange ideas. We share. It's really cool.
That's interesting. It sounds like you're very accustomed to change. Like you've been through a lot of phases where you had to leave behind what you've gotten used to start anew again.
Oh yeah. Man, it was just a lot of moving around, a lot of having to adapt and readapt and everything for sure. But you can literally put me anywhere in the world now and I'll be fine. Like I'll get up and I'll get used to it and adapt and integrate however.
So basically you went into film. Out of all of the different forms of academia there are, what was it about film studies that stood out to you? I
grew up reading so much, and I would watch so many different movies. Like I remember I had this little journal of, I organized it by like actor, actress, and like films, and I was committed to watching every single film for these actors or actresses. And I remember we'd go over to my grandma's house, and I would just go into her room and just sit myself down and watch movies for hours. That was my thing. It's a beautiful, different reality. You get exposed to a lot of openness and creativity. I knew I needed to do something with that passion, because you grow up loving something so much, and it's so much a part of you, and then how can you push that aside or keep it dormant? Film is also a beautiful political medium in many forms, in many ways for sure. I felt like film was more all-encompassing of the things that I wanted to share and do and learn about, because like I said, it's very socio-political. It's very, there's so much you learn about film in terms of psychology, in terms of politics, in terms of family, diversity, values and beliefs, right? Music even. So yeah, I decided I would take that plunge, even though it's not the most conventional way, I guess, because folks usually go for, I would say, quote unquote, the safer programs, which I really hate. The fact that we call them safer programs, because why can't we thrive in programs like film or any of the arts, right? Yeah.
Did you have any favorite films or films that you found influential to cementing your interest in that type of art or field?
Let's see. My first year, my first year in the radio, TV, film program in Lebanon, we watched a film called 8.5 by Federico Fellini, and I fell in love with it. So his genre is the magical realism genre, and I thought it was incredibly captivating and incredibly dreamy. And I watched it, and I felt like it pulled me right in. It's very, very profound, and I knew like this is what I want to do. Like film is Like, that's one of my favorite films for sure.
Yeah.
There's another one that I really love called In the Mood for Love, and it's by Wong Kar-wai. And it's one of my favorite films because the aesthetic is just incredibly beautiful and captivating. Like, the colors of that film are just unreal. So I spent, the good part of that first year at the university in Lebanon just taking in all of these incredibly beautiful films. And I felt like that was, the highest sort of creative, my creativity was heightened, basically, back then. I started doing more in terms of community organizing and activism, and I started, digging more for information in terms of, like, learning about our history here as settlers on indigenous land, learning more about, Palestinian human rights, going further in terms of my education. Like, the things I've learned in these past couple of years since I graduated, I would never expect to learn at any institution, to be honest. And so through that activism and that organizing and all of the people, the incredible people that I was able to meet, I started feeling like it was really waking me up more and more, and I was healing from whatever it was that sort of brought down that motivation, that inspiration, and I started feeling like, documentary is the way. I want to tell these stories. I want to tell my story. I want a platform, and I want to really shine the light on some of the most marginalized voices. And so that's how it started, and I was able to produce and direct a short documentary called The Constant Refugee. This was 2016, I believe, which we, entered into a bunch of different film festivals, and we ended up winning Best Documentary at the Air Canada Film Festival, which was really cool. And so I started feeling, a little more confident in my craft and more inspired to tell these stories, because, oh my God, like, we have so many stories that need to be told, but, we need to tell our own stories. This is what I was really kind of holding on to.
Would you say that you specialize in a certain subject matter or topic when it comes to film? And if so, what would that be?
As much as I love all mediums of film, documentary is definitely my specialization. For me personally, that's my go-to form. That's my go-to medium. For me, I think it's really important to document our stories in the rawest format, and to get people talking about the things that are happening to them, their experiences, to get certain stories out there. For far too long, our stories have been told for us by people who don't necessarily know what the experience has been like, which I think is very irresponsible, because, the thing about documentary is that you have to be really conscious and aware of your subjects. You don't want to hijack their story, because far too often what happens is that, people just jump on the refugee bandwagon and they, like, capitalize off of that, and they're like, refugee issues are the thing right now, so let's, like, write 500 articles about them and make, like, 25 documentaries or whatever. Let's win all the awards. I feel like there's a very othering lens that's given to us, or that we are portrayed by when, the camera falls into the wrong hands.
Yeah, so it would be nice to be depicted more as a human than a charity case.
Mm-hmm.
Almost.
Yeah. There's too much exploitation around these issues, for sure. And the further we go into this age of technology, the more accessible all of these mediums are to us, whether it's, camera phones or, professional cameras or whatever you want to call them. But there's always a way to document something, and things go viral. We live in the viral age, right?
Yes.
So that is the biggest issue I take, is that don't dishonor and disrespect your subject's experiences. I find it very dehumanizing when somebody comes into a community and goes, hey, I'm gonna, make a documentary about your experience, but like you can never really give it its justice truly when you're always the person on the outside, right?
Yeah, well, I think there's an overpowering effect almost, and perhaps it's unintentional, but the desire of the author to portray or to display themselves as virtuous almost supersedes the initial point of depicting the person's story in the first place.
And if you're not black, you're not going to be writing about the black experience, because how would you know what the black experience is like, right? Same thing as if you're not Muslim, you're not going to be writing about the Muslim experience or filming about it because you really have not experienced it. We obviously exist at the intersections for sure. Many of us do. And so it's really important to be mindful of that and respect our histories and where we're coming from, and not sort of gloss over the traumas, gloss over the racial divides, all of these things. And that is why I'm always like, we need to be very responsible in how we, advance, whether it's through writing, reporting, recording any type of video.
I imagine that when you think about making a film for the first time, you have a sort of design process that you think about. Does it work in the sense that you're trying to provide an experience, or you're trying to provide a set of feelings for the viewer?
Usually it's more of like a sense of urgency that I get, because I'm really active in the community and I do a lot of organizing. I come across a lot of folks who, or not even a lot of like a lot of communities, a lot of issues that just light this fire in me where I'm like, oh my God, like we have to make a documentary about this issue. Like it has to be, these stories have to be told. And my goal usually is to raise awareness about particular issues, to shed light on particular issues, to break stigmas and stereotypes around certain communities. My last documentary is called The Constant Refugee, and it's about this Armenian Iraqi refugee who had to flee. He fled Iraq when the war broke out, and then he went to Syria, and he lived there for a while, got married, had a kid, but then the Syrian war broke out as well, and he had to flee there. Then he went to Turkey, and if anyone knows anything about Armenian history, it's that Armenians were massacred by the Turkish government, basically. And so going to Turkey and hiding out for 2 years, trying not to be Armenian and stuff like that, and then finally coming to London, Ontario. Like, his journey was a harrowing, scary journey for sure. And so all these people who are constantly like, oh, refugees milking the system, refugees are criminals, refugees, immigrants, like, get out of our country. But like, do you forget whose land you're on? Like, we're on stolen land. Like, do we forget that this has been 151 years of colonialism? And do we forget how Canada was created, right? This is Turtle Island at the end of the day. And so when you come out with a documentary like this, you're trying to get the folks who have these preconceived notions of immigrants and refugees as these aliens, these quote-unquote illegals, right? You're trying to get them to see the human side of things, and you're trying to get them to understand that they don't have a choice in this, and that we, as Canadians, are also complicit in the wars that are happening abroad. So we can't just kind of sit back and be like, oh, it's not our problem, or like, we have a hand in the war, and then we don't want to, like, these refugees are coming to Canada because of, again, like our complacence or our complicity in these wars. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword.
Let's say that you were to come up with an idea for a new film. What's the process from its inception of the idea to execution? Like, do you have like a certain pattern that you flow, or is it more like go with it and see what happens?
I don't really have a, set process per se, but I know that when I get an idea, I'm like, okay, I'm going to talk to these people. And usually with documentary especially, you have to have access, right? Access meaning, you need to go to the source. So if, I want to make a documentary about an issue about refugee communities, I'm going to go to this person and ask this person, can I tell your story? This person, I already know this person, I've worked with this person in the community, all of these things. Obviously, it's absolutely about consent as well. But it's really important to just kind of get the story down, and I like it to be as organic as possible. I know we were talking earlier about asking permission way too much, and I'm not saying, you have to, go forth and just barge in on someone's life and be like, I am going to tell your story. It's more like, take the risk of actually, going the unconventional route. Like, not everything has to be perfectly structured and perfectly boxed in, and it's like, I know a lot, there's a lot of, I guess, arrogance when it comes to the arts, right? Where it's all about form and structure and rules and, what looks good according to certain experts and whatnot. And I would say to anyone out there who's, just starting out or even struggling, in the midst of their creative process, just do it. Just go ahead and let yourself sort of take that risk. However you end up failing, it's fine, because you learn. Like, I failed so much, which, played a big part in this sort of hiatus that I took away from film, because I was like, I'm terrible, I'm never going to make it, I suck, like, why am I can't even call myself a filmmaker. Like, I couldn't even call myself a filmmaker for the longest time. But I think it's really important that we really stop obsessing about the little things that are, ultimately unnecessary, and they are not important in our success, in our journey, really. And just go forth and do it, right? Your process will come to you. Like, this is always going to be a process. You never reach a point where you're like, okay, that's it, I know everything, right? There's always something to learn, and there's always something to improve on. And I think it's really, really important that you are, that all of us are kinder and gentler to ourselves, right? Because often what we'll do is we'll be a little too hard on ourselves. We'll kind of corner ourselves into this, or we'll push ourselves into this corner where we're like, okay, I can't really do anything anymore. Everybody is doing it better, or everybody is doing it this way, but like, do it your way, right? And this is why, like this documentary, The Constant Refugee, I did it in a weekend, right? So what happened was, we woke up really early Saturday morning. We went to their house, my subject's house, and we filmed all day. And then, we thanked them very much. We finished. And then the editing process, I would say, is the longest process for sure, because you want to make sure you are doing justice by the topic and by the subjects for sure. And so that was pretty much it. It was literally a weekend, and then the editing took a couple months. It wasn't very, very long, and it turned into a short film. But that's just a short film, right? It depends on how long you want it to be. It also depends on the content. This was a fairly simple documentary to make, and not to trivialize or minimize from the refugee experience at all, but we had enough information to make it a short documentary that we didn't have to keep going back and being like, no, you know what, let's do this again. So it worked out for us for sure. But usually, now that I'm going into my master's in film production, I most definitely have to I have to write a thesis about the documentary I'm making. I have to have a process for sure. So there's going to be a lot of organizing around that, a lot of scheduling and structuring and all of these things. So it's just going to come to me as I go, I suppose.
It makes a lot of sense when you say that process is kind of something that you figure out as you go along. Mm-hmm. And I imagine there's a lot more joy to be had in that way, because when you're given a structure to follow, if you follow it and you get success out of that, it kind of like lowers a sense of discovery. Because like if you're figuring it out for yourself and you realize that a technique that you just stumbled upon happens to work for you, that gives you like a sense of wonder that you don't really get from following a set of instructions or following a structure.
Any form of art will always feel intimidating because there are some incredibly brilliant people out there making incredible art, whether it's through film, whether it's through fine arts, whether it's through music. Like it's unreal.
You seem to have witnessed the culture of film in many different places around the world. Like you were talking about, how you're at the Dubai Film Festival. You've witnessed film culture in Lebanon, in Montreal, and in Toronto. Can you comment on any of the similarities and any of the differences, and whether or not there kind of exists a global film-like community or a global film-like sort of perspective?
Being at the Dubai International Film Festival was so intimidating and overwhelming, but it was also so beautiful and just brilliant, really, to be around all of these filmmakers and actors and, cinematographers and editors and audio folks. Like, it was awesome. There is incredible creativity in bigger cities, I think, because there's, way more resources and more exposure. And so you're able to have that creative freedom. Lots of events that happen year round, really. So like for Toronto, there's the Toronto International Film Festival, there's Nuit Blanche, same thing with Montreal, same thing with Dubai. So there's always something to go to, which again pumps your creative juices. That's pretty much what I've seen. There's a lot of beautiful, poetic feature films that are being produced in the Middle East, for sure. A lot around that sort of Arab experience, or the Arab diaspora, or the immigrant experience, or the theme of identity is prevalent even in the Arab world, for sure. It's heavy in colonialism, and it's heavy in the diaspora, for sure. And so there's a lot that's happening there, and I think it's really, really beautiful. And then there are a lot of incredible documentaries that are happening even in Toronto, right, and Montreal and Vancouver. And so I would say, and I don't think I can really pin it down to like one particular film culture. I think, like I said, film is intimidating globally, but it's also brilliant and beautiful globally, for sure. And it's really important that we look at it from the perspective of we as individuals are incredibly resilient, and we are multifaceted, and we have so many stories to tell. We just need to be able to get up and be like, yeah, my story deserves to be told. I'm going to tell my story. How am I going to do that? How is it going to be different? Just be as authentic and real as possible, right? Whether that's through documentary or photography or poetry or any of that stuff. You just have to get up and start.
Do you have any social media, any resources or literature where we can see more of your work, or some of the stuff that you yourself find interesting and would like to share with our listeners?
My films are not really available for the public. I'm not ready yet.
Okay.
Maybe soon, hopefully. I am on social media. I'm very active on social media. I share a lot of sociopolitical things on Facebook, Twitter. I use Instagram to post. It's a pretty public profile, so I like the Insta story. I was quite resistant to it at first, but now I use it every day. So you just have to look for me. I think I'm the only Leila Almawy. It's just Leila Almawy, so on all mediums.
Thank you for joining us on this episode. If you or someone you know would like to be on the show, contact us through our social media channels. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Collective Journey. And always keep in mind, this is not just my adventure, but it's yours as well. This is our collective journey.